Just to start out, I noticed that there's a motif in your work of circles that is present through a lot of your work, but particularly for the character of Barbie Chang, this conception of a circle seems to be the source of a lot of anxiety for her. So I was wondering if you could just talk about circles, the significance of that.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that, the community that we lived in, at the school that our children went to, some of the moms would stand in this sort of enclosed circle. And it was both welcoming for them or people who were in the circle, or but exclusionary to other people. And then sometimes when I would be socializing or standing, I noticed people tend to, after 3 or 4 people got together, we would stand in a circle. So it was just kind of an interesting idea of that. Well, circle, is very welcoming socially, and then you feel connected to the people that you're talking to, and then also at the same time, simultaneously, very exclusionary. And so it becomes this sort of metaphor in the book for that paradoxical feeling of being complicit in creating your own circles, but also it becomes a name for the character Barbie Chang in the book feeling excluded a lot by this circle of women.
Yeah, like there seems to be a simultaneous desire for it, and there's a line that says that she's allergic to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all sort of wanting to fit in and to belong somewhere, and sometimes we foolishly sort of bang our head against the wall and try and belong in a circle, a metaphorical group of people that we shouldn't probably be interested in. And so that's that paradoxical feeling of desire and repellent, I guess, at the same time.
Okay. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your writing process. Like, what strategies do you use both to motivate yourself to write? In what ways do you sit down to write? Is it a habitual thing? How does it come to you?
Yeah, I think writing for me is sort of this really short period of writing a lot in one period of time, because it's sort of this obsession and passion that I have to kind of get whatever I'm thinking about, and has sort of held out, for the longest time because of time and things like that, and just burst it, it all just spills out. But then in terms of revision, I actually like to revise and sit down sort of as much as I can on a daily basis, but it doesn't happen, maybe every other day or a couple times a week, to actually work on a manuscript that I'm working on. But, I think I said last night, but I also say all the time, is that, revising is also writing. So
Yeah.
it's just, for me, writing comes from a different mysterious place, and so it's harder to kind of control that and have a habit. I mean, it's not the same as working out for me, or something like that. It's something much more magical and mysterious. So I want to kind of draw from that weird, unknown place for inspiration, and revision I do kind of every day kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're famous for the very direct word choice in your work. There's no room for ambiguity in this. There's an intense specificity in your word choice.
Yeah.
And so it seems like this process of editing is something that you really rely on for just your creative process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fun, and I enjoy it, and I like working through every single word, and every choice gets thought about. And I mean, sometimes the poem will write itself, and then I don't make that many changes on it. But other times I'll just keep working on the same poem for a really, really, really long time. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So you've mentioned before that you view poetry as compared to other forms of literature as unique in that it grants room for the reader to sort of fill in their own interpretation. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so different than anything else, any other form of writing, but also I think it's more like visual art, like you see a piece of modern visual art, and it could be anything really. I mean, it could be just one block of blue, and it's the receiver and the person looking at it has to kind of interpret it in a way that only they can. And so it's the relationship between that piece of art and the receiver is, I think, part of the enjoyment of reading poetry and also writing poetry. And I think that in, with other forms of art like prose, I think that a lot more is sort of explicitly stated. And even when there's mystery, quote unquote, kind of left in prose writing and fiction or nonfiction, it's still not that mysterious. I mean, there are some things that you need to tell a story. And I think in poetry, even if you have a narrative and a story, you can still leave all sorts of things out and leave things for interpretation that readers are, good poetry readers are used to and want. They don't want to be told everything. And so I think of poetry as just having a lot of gaps. And I think that's what's really nice. Yeah.
All right, so sort of shifting gears here a little bit. You were the editor of an anthology that was released in 2004 called Asian American Poetry, The Next Generation. And so as we approach the 15-year anniversary of that next year, I was wondering if you could talk about how you think the landscape of Asian American poetry has changed since then.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a ton. I've thought many times that someone should do a new one. Because right now, I mean, it feels like there's so many great Asian American poets writing books and writing poems that get published in journals, and there's so many that I can't even keep track of. And when I was first starting, there were hardly any, but there were enough that I was looking around and I was thinking, but there's nowhere I could find them all in one place. And so the impulse was to kind of create something that would be helpful to someone like me that was wanting to read more poetry by people that were like me, but also had very different experiences than myself. But yeah, I think it's changed so much in that there's just more of us, and there's a lot of us writing in different kinds of ways and different forms, about different things. Many of us have very different experiences, and so I think there's more diversity within Asian American poetry. But I would love someone to do another one. I've thought about doing it myself, and I thought, it's so hard to do an anthology because inevitably you're going to exclude people. And so I think that's just going to be really hard to do, especially since I've been writing poetry for so long, and that it would have to be really big. And even then you would exclude people. So I'm not really interested in doing that as much now. I think someone else would probably be a good person to do that. But yeah, I think it's a great time in poetry in general, but I think publishers have also been a lot more open to publishing different kinds of people. And I think that's helped open things up a little bit too, which is good.
And you'd say that would extend beyond Asian American poets?
Definitely.
Just for poetry writ large?
Absolutely, yeah. Right, when I was first starting out, I mean, the only journal that I could really find that was visibly, obviously publishing people of color was the Crab Orchard Review. That was the only one, and I couldn't find any other ones that were visibly publishing like multiple people of color. And so now it's like you look around, I mean, Poetry Magazine is publishing multiple different types of poets with all different backgrounds. And I think they're gradually finally catching up. And, I'm kind of old. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's about time, is all I can say.
Right.
That the landscape is finally opened up, and there's such a backlog now. So it's like, it's causing other types of issues and issues of exclusion for other types of people.
Curating issues.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, all in all, I think it's a good thing because, I've waited. In my lifetime, I never thought something like this would happen. So it's been nice for me to see, yeah.
Well, that's encouraging, I think, to hear. I think a lot of young poets, especially college-age poets who are still trying to figure out, like, what does that even mean to be a poet professionally?
Right.
Like, a lot of them for a long time have felt pretty discouraged, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's par for the course. I think if you're a writer, your existence is just generally to feel discouraged. That's
Okay.
but that's when you're writing, you can feel discouraged, but at least try and enjoy the writing. The second part of that, which is getting your work out into the world, is just a discouraging process. I mean, it's not easy, and the people who end up succeeding, which just means getting your work out into the world, they're usually just tough. We are a persistent, tough bunch that end up sending our work out, and we just don't give up. And especially for people like women, people of color, other types of people that don't fall into sort of this, kind of conventional style. It could be the style in which you write. The obsessions and the persistence are pretty much what keeps you going, and you have to want it more than anything else. And you have to want to write well, and then you also have to want to get your work out there. Otherwise, there's so many easier things to do.
Okay, right, right. Okay, so just to sort of wrap up here a little bit, one thing that we like to ask our visiting writers, and I think it's a little bit of a generic question, but just sort of because we're in a educational environment, and because there are a lot of people who are trying to figure out what it looks like to be a writer, either full-time or transition from another occupation into writing.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could talk about your sort of you have this narrative shift in your life from the business world to
Mm-hmm.
the writing/academic world. So I was wondering if you could talk about that, and then also sort of end with what advice you might have for young writers, up and coming writers.
I mean, I think anyone who wants to be a writer should just think of it as the long haul. It's not like today or tomorrow, or I'm going to publish a book when I'm this age or that. You just think of it as like my whole life. I am a writer because I love writing. And I think if you have that long view, it's not as hard to sort of kind of stay doing it the whole time, no matter what kind of comes and interrupts your life. I mean, lots of things will interrupt your life. Things like, your parents might get sick, you might decide to have children, you might be so busy in your new job, whatever that might be. It's hard to make a living as a writer. Most people don't do it. And so you end up, you might have to take other jobs in the process, but keep writing in just that whole time. Just make sure you keep writing. But if you're so busy in maybe a couple years, it's okay. If you don't write anything for 2 years, 5 years, it's fine. Because if you think of it, it's like your whole life, and it's just 1 or 2 years or 5 years, it's fine. I would go years without writing anything in that period of time where I was really busy with childcare and dealing with my parents' illnesses and having jobs and things. And just dealing with all sorts of other physical ailments, things that might come in your way. I had foot surgery, I had back injuries. That stuff is just going to be a part of your life. That's just life. And you think you're going to be out of those phases. Oh, this is just a hard patch in my life. No, that's life. All of us will have so many of those, and as long as you stay true to loving writing, you can just read during that time, or just don't do anything, and if you love it, you'll get back to it. And so just don't give up, and don't feel bad if you're not always doing something.
Yeah, I think there's a pressure to get there's a timeline that a lot of people, it's mostly imagined,
there
right?
is a time.
It's mostly imagined.
It's in our heads.
But it's like if you're not published by 30, then it's not going to happen, or some sort of pressure like that.
I understand that pressure, and I felt that pressure. And I totally relate to that pressure. And then you see people around you doing X, Y, or Z, and it's hard to stay motivated. I mean, you feel bad when you see other people doing all these things. You're like, I should be doing these things too. But
especially
everyone's
with social
different.
media nowadays, it's we only ever see the most awesome stuff that's going on in people's lives.
Everybody has their own timeline. I mean, I've seen some of my friends come out fast, and they win the Yale Book Prize, or they win a Whiting, or right away, right out of the gate. I mean, I wasn't that kind of writer. I just knew that for me it was a gradual getting better, like a little snail. And I was fine with that. I was like, I can't be that person. I don't know how to come out of the gate like that. I just don't have, that's just not me. I don't have those gifts, and if they have those gifts, I'm so happy for them. But there's pros and cons to both ways. Come out of the gate too fast.
It clearly worked out for you.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah. But it's like working out means what exactly? Having books, right? I mean, we want to get our books out into the world. And so I think if that's a goal, I mean, if you could wait your whole life and have one book, that's wonderful.
Something, yeah.
It's something, yeah. It's just not good to keep wanting too much more. I always just wanted one book. And so the fact that I have 4 books of poems, I'm so grateful, but I would still have been happy with that one book, really.
Right, okay.
And I think that it's good to kind of remember and maintain that perspective that we love the writing, and the second part of it is, you know, it's difficult, but if you never published a book, you still love the writing. And that's something to remember. But yeah, and I think if you do want to publish and get your work out there, you gotta work hard. And you gotta learn, and you gotta keep pushing yourself, but understand that life could get in the way, and that's okay.